You're listening to The Grip, where we take hold of mindset and martial arts. Now, let's get started. Welcome back, and thanks for tuning into part 2 of my conversation with Roland. If you haven't caught part 1 yet, be sure to check it out first so you're all caught up. What happened once you made this shift to Washington as far as training schedule?
It's hard. I really didn't understand what lineage was in a sport, but in a martial art, I don't think I knew either. Studying other martial arts, it's so classical, right? And there's no lineage. It just kind of fades off after you're a teacher. And one of the things is Jiu-Jitsu is kind of a 20th century thing. I mean, you can follow yourself all the way back to the turn of the century to Jigoro Kano, right? And there isn't a definitive list that is shared by everybody, especially historians. Robert Drysdale wrote a book because he's actually a studied historian. And then he put out Opening the Closed Guard, and it was eye-opening. He goes, all the lineages that people are looking at, there's so many people in between. There's not really validation for a lot of those things, right? And that part really hooked me. So when I was training with Rick, and Rick was like, no, this is our lineage. Boom, 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 boom. This was my judo teacher. You kind of have to set your entire training with your bona fides, right? Like, where do you sit in the story? And that really hooked me. So when I left, I told Rick, no one's going to touch my belt. And he goes, of course not. I was like, okay, well, he agrees. He's not just passing me on to somebody else. And it was a decision before I really left. But then when I got here to Washington, I trained with a bunch of people, and it just wasn't the same. And it wasn't that it was worse. It was just a different flavor. I mean, you can't ask a Sprite person to start falling in love with Dr. Pepper. It's just not going to happen, right? It's just, or vice versa. They're just different people, right? And I didn't realize that we were the weird ones. I thought we were the normal ones because that's where I came from. But we were so old school. So, it was really hard for me to detach. So I had to, in my mind, kind of say, okay, I'm paying for mat time. And I'm here when I'm learning from these other professors, and they're great professors, and they're showing me great technique. But my intention and my drive is the same, because their intentions were sport jiu-jitsu. Everything is sport jiu-jitsu, right? And everybody has motivations for why they teach what they teach. And that's why lineage is important. Why are the techniques you do what you do? And you realize, like, oh, well, this person was a cop. This person was a prize fighter. I mean, it really does drive the technique that you use the most and the intention for your technique. But if you're a sport jiu-jitsu person from beginning to end, and it's all about competition, it's all about medals, that will drive a different style. I just I've never enjoyed that style. I enjoy competing. I really enjoy competing. But, I can't hold jiu-jitsu competition at the pinnacle of what jiu-jitsu is. I just can't, because I came through when, there was no pro jiu-jitsu. Pro jiu-jitsu was fighting. So if there's not that relevance, I don't really know, I don't really know how to get on board with some other instructors. So when I was training at one place, I liked our instructors. They were nice people, great technique, just different game. They're really focused on the game that they liked. And kind of one of the things that I liked about that is people teach only what they know works, which is great. That's great. But a lot of people that focus on that, they get really good at one game or a couple games, and that's all they teach. And that becomes, everybody that comes out of their gym, they're De La Hiva players. Oh, they're guard players. They're close guard players. But everything else is lackluster. So my focus, Rick was always like, you need to learn everything. If you can't learn everything, then what good are you as a teacher? Rick was so upfront, like, you're worthless to everybody that's in your class if you're teaching. If you can't learn something for everybody, you have to be able to bring something to the people. Otherwise, on the whole pie, you can't just serve them a slice and say, no, this is good enough. And I was like, oh, okay. And he goes, old school, new school, everything. You have to try to get good at everything. And you have to fail at it all, and then try to get good at it. Part of that bit me in the ass because I've, I blew both my knees playing guards incorrectly, trying to play these guards that were kind of out of my reach. And then since I've learned how to play them safely, but literally just trying to play guards that really I wanted to get good at to teach, not necessarily use all the time.
Sure.
So
Because what belt were you at this time when you were in Washington?
I was a 4-stripe purple belt, I think.
Okay. And so when did you get into that level of continuing to train at various gyms, get mat time? When did you switch from that student to getting the opportunity to teach?
So I was training at Universal BJJ with Mel Locke. He's a Pedro Sauer black belt. Really good guy, good black belt. And I love training with him because he was a guy that also wants to learn it all, right? And he had a fighting background, just a really good dude. And him and I really connected because he saw that I was not in this for bragging rights. I was just in it for the hard training and just to get better. And him and his family are some of the best people I've ever met. At their core, morally, just the best people. Their family is just amazing. And I loved that pure energy coming out of him, and there were other gyms in the area that were probably more known for competition, but I don't think better. I think his focus was a little purer than most, because to validate the success of your gym at like low level local competitions, and oh, look how many gold medals we won at a local competition where there's 2 people in a weight class. It's like, stop, But then again, it's good because they're promoting the sport and they're getting people doing this. But at the same time, I really liked where Mel was coming from. And I still do. I love his family to death. They're so much fun to train with. And I loved training there, but I was only there for a year. And then I moved up here to Seattle, and Seattle was just a different vibe. It was very different. And at that point, I wasn't teaching yet, but after class, I'd be learning something. We would learn our technique and then we'd spar. And classes were so short in Seattle. It was weird. It's kind of common, like these short classes. Some places have longer classes, but most were short. And it was like hobbyist timeline. And I wasn't used to that. I didn't know that. And it was strange. And it was my problem to adjust, not anyone else's. And so I'm like trying to adjust to this different mindset of like shorter time periods and just jiu-jitsu business, because I've never looked at jiu-jitsu as a business. And so I understand.
By shorter time periods, Roland, because I know you were saying before you guys would be training 2-3 hours. Was these shorter time periods like an hour or less? Is that what you're saying?
Like an hour, like a class would be
Okay.
an hour.
Okay.
And I think I couldn't even fathom.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to teach anything in an hour. I feel like there's just not enough. You have to warm up. You have to do this. And our style of class structure is very old school Carlson Gracie style. Hard warm-ups to get your body ready for the drilling and technique, and then sparring to sharpen the technique, right? And positional sparring, a lot of positional sparring, and then varied rounds. When Rick went to Brazil, Rick was training with Alan Goes, Pedro Carvalho, those guys, and like kind of like the Pit Boy days, where everybody had their head shaved and cauliflower ear and just monsters, right? And so Rick really liked that style, and because those fighters were winning the most, so Rick just kind of floated to whoever was winning. And in Brazil, they had a pretty strong team pride where you don't jump teams, right? You don't want to be a creole, so you don't want to go from one team. They invest in you, and then you go compete for someone else. And I understand business wise why that is, and loyalty wise. And Rick came from a wrestling background, so in wrestling, you had to seek the room to make you better, right? Like it wasn't, there wasn't as much like loyalty because it was an individual sport. So, and his professor is Joe Moreira, right? So Master Joe Moreira, he's kind of like the jiu-jitsu community has been trying to erase him for years because, he was kind of feeding the other side of jiu-jitsu, which was the non-Gracie side. And he was teaching Americans. He was teaching anybody. He didn't care. He was cross-training with Luta Livre guys. He was friends with all of them, while the Gracie family was fighting with them on the beaches of Ipanema, right? He's out like befriending them and fighting side by side with them. And they were kind of the no-gi guys. And he's like, look, when I fight, I'm in a sangha. Like, it makes sense. Gi, no-gi. Well, you can do it here. Well, come on. He was so much more practical, and he just didn't burn any bridges. And now the bridges are burning him because the Gracie family didn't like the fact that he was training other people that were fighting. Now he became a rival camp. And Joe never looked at it that way, I don't think. And then his professor, Master Francisco Mansour, he was a cop. Jiu-jitsu was how you stay alive. It was so for everybody. I met I met Francisco. All of us were in the same place when Joe got his red belt. And to listen to somebody talk about jiu-jitsu with a reverence and love that somebody would talk about like their Lord and Savior. I mean, he looks at jiu-jitsu as being something like a biblical principle that it was. I mean, he truly believes it was given to man from God, and it has like a monk-like happiness. Have you ever read the book I think it's called Practicing the Presence of God? I think it's by Father Lawrence. It's like the second most popular religious book next to the Bible. It's amazing. Super short read, but it's awesome. And it's about a French monk who, after World War I, joins a monastery and literally he's a cook. And it's love letters to God. Everything he does is just in the devotion to glorify God. And he's just happy. And he talks to God as if he's next to him. It's like literally if Jesus is walking next to him, they have a dialogue. And so it's so funny that, there's so many bishops and popes and this and that. And the second most revered religious writing is a cook. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Right? It's amazing. That same energy is coming from Francisco, where his advice was never stop teaching white belts. He goes, your priority is white belts, because without white belts, you'll never have any more red belts. And his love for teaching beginners is wild. And it's so funny because I think that you see a lot of places where you get people that get their black belt and they're like, I made it. Like I'm an authority now. You should listen to what I have to say. And that's not it at all. When I got my black belt, and I'm very open about this, I'm like, oh, wow, I'm starting. And it's really hard to tell people, hey, you're going to bust your ass for 10 years and you're going to lose parts of yourself. You didn't want those parts anyways, but part of you is going to die and it's going to hurt. That's the part you want to go away. But after 10 years, you can start understanding jiu-jitsu, start learning jiu-jitsu, and you're like, what?
Yeah.
And it's because it's that deep. And, when Master Rick got his coral belt, I asked him, I go, how does this feel, Rick? And he goes, feels like I'm starting over again. And that's a coral belt. He doesn't coral belt, literally having the humility of, hey man, I'm still learning. It's like everyone's swimming and you're all swimming together and you're all tethered together. You're just a little head, but you're pulling everybody else. It's such a group kind of hive action. And you have too much pride and the 2 inches of cotton around your waist. I mean, you stop swimming. Yeah. And all you're doing is pulling everybody else back. It's a really, really, really felt thing because, I've been to open mats, I've had cross train with other people and watched black belts just get melted in a room where they're like, oh, and you see the look on their face. Oh no, I've been teaching too much. I haven't been training. Oh man, like it's a rough one. And I've seen guys that are, they're world champs. They're sitting world champs, man. They grab that belt hard. They let everybody know, they're a big deal. And then they get cooked by somebody who doesn't even compete, some obscure person. And it's like, you can't be too prideful in the sport, because you will absolutely get reminded on the daily.
You will get crushed.
Oh, always. So like, which I love that about jiu-jitsu. There's always some dude or some girl that nobody's heard of. And then somebody who's multiple time world champs. And then all of a sudden one person goes, I think I'm going to make a run for it this year. And then just kill everybody. And then go back into obscurity and go, well, what happened? I don't know. I'm an accountant. You know what I mean? They're a nurse, they're busy, like it's crazy.
And so how are you staying connected with Rick throughout this time?
Oh, I would go back. I'd go back and train with him. Like I'd fly back, we'd train for a week. And when I was contracting, I would hop back quite a bit. He would come up and visit. And Jonna she loved the Northwest. She hated Redmond. And she got pregnant with Loudon, our youngest. And she just had it. She didn't like living up here in an apartment. We were both working. We were kind of tight on money because we still had a house that we were kind of paying for, and we didn't have renters in it all the time. It was just it was a lot. And she was missing family quite a bit. And it's kid number 4. So she said, we're moving back. And I went, because I loved it up here and I was being promoted and things were coming and I was like, no, we're planting roots. And every Monday I would go and I would train at a different gym. I would meet the professor. I would train with all their upper belts and just made a bunch of friends. And I was like, man, I was like, and there's a lot of good gyms in Seattle and a lot of good people and different personalities, a lot of different personalities. There's a lot of professors that I really liked and connected with. But geographically it's just too far away.
And your parents were still in Arizona?
My parents were in Arizona, and as soon as I got back, or I mean, as soon as we got there, and I was hiring on to Microsoft, my dad passed away, and
Mm.
that was a tough one. That was something different. My dad's always been my best friend. And I mean that's he was the rock of the family. He was the patriarch. My dad wasn't a big hulking guy. He was, 5'7", 160 pounds, slight shoulders and a little pot belly and a big smile, and everybody loved him. None of the guys ever gave him a hard time. He was never a rough and tumble guy, but at least growing up that I ever saw. I mean, I saw him get into a fight one time. We were all watching football and it was after a Pop Warner football game, and my brother started the fight. My dad's got somebody in a headlock and he's like giving him a noogie, and it was like almost comical. I'm like, this is the craziest thing I've ever seen, right? I was like, what is happening? And but I was petrified of my dad. I was always petrified of my dad because he's your father. You don't mess with your dad's like, he's the man.
Mm-hmm.
He always knew what to say when you needed to hear it. When he got sick, it was big. It was big on the family.
Did you know he was sick when you were over in Afghanistan? And so when he said, I think it's time for you to be close to home, that's when you knew his health was deteriorating?
It was pretty bad. He had he had a lupus anticoagulant issue that made a blood clot go to his adrenal glands and shut down his adrenal glands. So he has kind of like a faux Aitchison's syndrome. So he didn't produce any adrenaline. So he had to take a bunch of steroids, which it made him heavy, which induced all the diabetes, and the diabetes that killed him. But I mean, he almost died like 7 times. Every year he would just go to the hospital and it was just family, we'd all come out, and then we'd all come out, and it was exhausting for my mom, and my mom has a hard time handling that much stress, and it was wild. And to watch her handle all that, she took care of him. He would have absolutely died 10 years earlier if it wasn't for my mom. My mom was just right by his side. It was she kept him alive. Yeah. And then when he got sick, I got the call, hey, dad's in the hospital again. I jammed down there, and they had just intubated him, and they said, it's, you guys need to call people. And I didn't know, from all the stuff that I was doing, I have to visualize stuff before I do it. And it was one of those things where when I went overseas, I had to visualize like my own, like what the end of time for me is going to look like. Right. So now I'm seeing my dad and I know it's coming, and,
kind of like I'm preparing for the worst.
Yeah. And so, I didn't want to miss anything. So they were like, hey, we're going to extubate him right now. It's pretty hard to watch. And I said, I'm not going to miss anything. I'm not leaving this room. And my other brothers left. They're like, we can't watch this. And I'm like, and I didn't think it was weird, but my brothers are having a really hard time with it. And I always told everybody, hey, well, my dad's my best friend. If something ever happens to him, I'm going to take a long walk for 30 days and don't expect to see me, because I don't know how I'm going to handle it. And so when he was going downhill and I got there, the doctor said, hey, it's time. And all of a sudden we get a phone call from one of his childhood friends. And they said, hey, don't pull the plug. Stop. You just stop. We're all coming down. And we were like, what? Yeah, somebody posted on Facebook that Don's not doing good and we're all coming down. We're all rallying each other up. It's going to take us 3.5 hours. Just please. Right. Okay. Yeah, sure. Oh man, what's going on? And my mom's like, oh, I've been keeping one of his friends up to date. So they're all from all over Southern California. They all met each other at the hospital and they all came in. There's 30 people in this care room. And the doctor was like, I've never seen this. And I was like, I don't know. Yeah. I was like, and I was sitting there and everybody's sitting around and talking about my dad before I knew my dad. And they were like, oh, your dad was so tough. And I'm like, what? They were like, man, I remember when he showed up in grade school, he used to wear these pointy zoot suit shoes. And man, he used to brag he could kick a cigarette out of your mouth. And I was like, my dad? Get out of here. My dad was like the most American dude on the planet. My dad barely spoke Spanish. But back then it was different, right? Because, you know, he was young and his upbringing was different. My dad grew up on a ranch in Yorba Linda when Yorba Linda was just orange groves, like pickers, orange groves. My dad spoke Spanish all the time. Everybody spoke Spanish. Like my dad was Mexican, you know, so it's just wild hearing these stories. And my dad, and so I'm learning so much. And it was just, there was so much love in the room. It was unreal. And there were, you know, the doctor was like, okay, well, it's time. He might start suffering if we don't do something. And then so my mom laid in bed with him and everybody just got around the bed. And I mean, and the room is packed with people. And I just kind of looked at everybody. I said, what would my dad listen to if he were to go?
Mm.
And Bob Dylan. And I'm like, what? It's Bob Dylan. So we put on some Bob Dylan and then he just slipped away. And I was so shocked. Like it was such a sobering moment because like I had spent this time the last 5 years before that preparing myself that if I'm going to die, I'm going to die in a foreign country, probably during the day in the hot sun, listening to, you know, a language I don't understand, probably Arabic or Farsi or God knows what, right? And probably die slowly from bleeding out from being shot, right? And, you know, running from somewhere to somewhere by myself. And my family's probably going to see me burnt or, you know, hanging from a bridge or something. I had to be okay with that. So like I hadn't decompressed from being okay with that. That's how you die, right? Especially when I came back with the guy in Iraq, one of my buddies who actually helped me get to my company in Afghanistan. You know, he had just got killed in Kabul. I saw it on TV and I was like, oh, I probably won't know one of those guys. I said it in passing and I did. It was my buddy. And you know, and he was the only one that they let out because he was the only one that was that was not a military guy. He was a cop from South Carolina. And he's a great person. But we know what comes with this job.
Mm-hmm.
So we accept it. Our families have accepted it. So this is kind of like the thinking that I was in. And I had no idea somebody could pass in such a beautiful way. So it was just
Powerful.
Oh, it was huge. And I walked out and the doctor was like, I have never in 30 years of being a doctor have ever seen this. Your dad must have been special. And I was like, he was the best. And I watched my brothers fall apart. I watched my mom fall apart. Inside, I mean, I was devastated. But when it came to the family, I didn't realize at that point that like I had to be useful. And I didn't think anybody was supposed to lean on me. And I didn't know what had prepared me for that. And that's why when people train jiu-jitsu, you know, they're like, man, I want to lose 100 pounds. I wanted this. I wanted that. I want to be a world champion. I want this. And I go, cool. And they're like, why are you blowing me off? And I'm like, I'm not. And I said, jiu-jitsu is going to get you ready for the worst thing that you don't know is coming yet. And so jiu-jitsu helped me handle the passing of my dad. I mean, 100%. I didn't know that was what it was for. And I was just useful. And it was unreal. And then that night, after he had passed, and my mom was like, I'm going to go take a nap. My mom was like actually relieved because she'd been taking care of him for so long. She's like, he's okay. He's with God. And she goes, what are you going to do? And I went, I'm going to go train. I'll come back. And I called Rick and Rick goes, hey man, I heard, I'm sorry. And I said, yeah, thanks man. I said, hey, do you mind if we get a Roland? He goes, no problem. Come on down. So I head down there. Gym's closed. It's all dark. And we flip on one light. We both walk in and we don't say two words to each other, throw our gis, put our gis on, slap hands, bump. We roll for 2 hours straight. Rick just beats the shit out of me. I mean, yeah, Rick doesn't know what flow rolling is, but I mean, that's what I needed. And we just trained, we just trained hard. And then we were done, smacked his hand, gave him a hug. And I said, hey, he really liked you. And he goes, I really liked him too. Folded our gis next to each other. Didn't say 2 words, walked out and I was fine. I mean, not fine.
I think that's so relatable though to Roland is I think a lot of people go into jiu-jitsu with great intentions and knowing that it can get them great opportunities and really successful moments and just the camaraderie. I mean, there's so many positives that come from jiu-jitsu, but as far as the carryover, you said it beautifully in terms of it really does strengthen you in ways that you don't even know you need it until some of these bad situations come in, whether it's physical situations, personal things, emotional things. I think jujitsu has such a beautiful way of reaching so many different avenues,
Yeah.
coping wise, and just strengthening people and helping them build that resiliency. You don't really know it's happening until you just have that day in and day out engagement with it. And it's pretty amazing. It truly is. I think that's why people get so obsessed with it.
Yeah.
Clearly,
Yeah,
I
right?
think that's a
Clearly,
huge
yeah.
point of it is
It's amazing, but it was something that, I didn't realize that jujitsu had done a lot of things. That was one major thing that I noticed was a takeaway from jujitsu. And, Rick made jujitsu so hard, so demanding. He gave it to us like he got it, right? So to give it any other way it would just seem blasphemous because you don't get that same resolve. So when you train something for sport, people quit sports. People quit sports all the time. Jiu-jitsu is not a sport. So like, you could be addicted to a sport, but after a certain injury, you just might call it good. But when you're training, even when you have disabilities, I think you've transcended a sport into an art. And, when you can work out so many things, it really does reach an artist level. And, to just call it a sport really it makes it transactional again. And you miss kind of the most important part of why you're training,
mhm,
like, and I mean, everybody's got a story about how jujitsu saved their life, and they're not wrong. They're not wrong. Jujitsu also kind of brought me back to my faith. All these years of seeing horrible stuff, police work at Bullhead City is not, not for the faint of heart. And living in a foreign country that's war torn is not for the faint of heart either. And then being away from your family and just, you go through, pardon my language, but for a lot of my life, I've always felt like a huge piece of shit. And that, I felt like I was not worthy to go into church, especially, in high school. I kind of had a hypocritical response to me going to church by some church members. Um, and, it was something that just pushed me away from church for a long time. And when I went, I felt like if I walked into a church, it'd follow me. And that, that self-loathing for a long time was the, the motivation, the why I could train hard. Like that toxic self-loathing was like building up in me and just kind of eating away at my soul. And, most people, especially in first responder, careers, they drink it away. They gamble it away. They do a lot of these, a lot of horrible things and rely on vices. And when you're doing those things, you don't realize that your overall spirituality and soul and sensitivity shrinks and shrinks and shrinks. And I would train super hard. And it kind of emptied that tank of that toxic whatever that was filling up,
mhm,
eating away at my soul. And I didn't realize that was my motivation and I didn't get it. And then everyone was like, well, why are you training so hard, man? And I'm like, oh, and I assumed it was uh, discipline. I mistook it for discipline. But outside of this, I'm not super disciplined. If I have the choice to sit on the couch and eat cookies and, hug my family, I'd much rather do that than anything. But everyone's like, why do you train so much? You drive so far to train and train every day. Da, 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 da. I'm like, because you're supposed to, Rick could always say that because you're supposed to. Okay. Yeah, because you're supposed to. And then, I realized it, it pushed down that self-loathing enough for me, like my kids were going to church without us. And then all of a sudden, John wanted to go. And I was like, I could probably walk in there and I don't think it'll follow me. I'm not the greatest person in the world, but not so bad that it'll follow me. So maybe I can go. Maybe I can hide in the back and I can get away with this. And it helped me go back. And then it helped me hear the things I needed to hear and realize where my salvation really lies, right? And then all of a sudden, after, I don't know, I've been going to church and just really, really reading the Bible a lot, studying a lot of notes, a lot of just thought towards, spirituality and God. And next thing I think I was still a first degree black belt, or the first black belt that I got. Um, the core of it is red. And, on the top and the bottom, I wore completely through the black into the red. And then I started wearing through all of the black. So a lot of red was popping out. It looked really blasphemous. It was like red and white and black. And I was like, oh, this is really, I should not be wearing this. It's starting to look coralish, right? So I'm like, oh, I'll get a new belt. So I was about to order a new belt, and I'm like, I'll wait till I get my second degree. And I was really close to my second degree. And our gym had been open for, about a year and a half. And I went, oh man. And one day, just one day, I was like, I could totally stay at home and just not go to practice. And I went, oh no. This whole time I've been working off motivation, not dedication. I didn't hate myself as much because I was understanding more of the word. And, so many people create strife in their own life because they know what their gasoline is. Their gasoline is that, right? Is that self-loathing.
Mm.
Do they go screw up some more? It's kind of like a Marine thing. Like, hey, life's too easy. I need to go make it harder. And so they're good at that. Got a lot of buddies that are Marines, man. They're awesome. But they, that's a common, pitfall. And for some reason I recognized it and I was like, oh no. And then I was like, I am working off of discipline now. Okay. And I've kind of set up my schedule to really, really train a lot and do this. And okay, now I need to step up and be a big boy. So I ordered another black belt because I wore out my other one. And on that black belt, it says, for God, for my family, I will never stop. And it's embroidered black on black, so nobody ever sees it. And now I'm working off of discipline. Now I really am doing things because you're supposed to, you're supposed to do these things. And it's pretty wild that I thought I was disciplined for, the last 10 years. Nope.
There's much deeper meaning as to why you kept coming back.
Oh yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. And we would train with people and on Sundays, they're like, dude, what's wrong with you? You don't realize what people are doing, what they're going through. You
Mhm.
just don't know. No one knows. Everybody has a life that they don't want anybody to see. And
Mhm.
it's not wrong, but it exists. And some people's deep end, it's deep. It's dark. It's
Yeah.
real dark. And that's okay. I mean, that's okay, but you have to know how to manage it. And
Yeah.
and for me, it was I had to go to the deep end and train. I've had people visit, upper belts visit. A black belt asked one time, he's like, I've never seen people push this hard for no reason. It's crazy. And I was like, why? He goes, well, what are you getting ready for? What do you mean? What are you guys getting ready for? I I had no idea what they were talking about. I was like, what are you talking about? And they're like, well, are you guys getting ready for a competition or no? We're getting ready for tomorrow. Well, I don't know what you're talking about. This is what we do. Why? And I'm like, because you're supposed to. Like couldn't process. I had to like sit and think about it and talk to some friends that didn't always train with us. They trained to other places first. And I didn't realize like I was probably projecting a lot of how I deal with my own demons onto everyone on the mat, and then I kind of think about Rick, and that's probably how Rick handles himself too, but it's a healthy way. And I didn't realize that I had passed it on to my kids. But it's so much easier to see your kids do it because like my daughter was having a really rough time with injuries and, she got a scholarship for wrestling and just handling the pressure cooker of college wrestling. And she goes, dude, I just need to relax. I just want to come home for spring break and just relax and just do jujitsu. And I was like, what? I was like, what are you talking about? Relax and do jujitsu. And she goes, nah, I just relax. Jujitsu is relaxing to me. It helps me. So, when she's having a rough time, I mean, could you imagine a girl in her 20s is having a hard time with boys, school, friends, and what does she do? She goes to the mat room.
Mhm.
And it makes me proud because I wasn't always that guy that had that outlet, but
Sure.
I found it early. And I'm glad that my kids have that now. So that
Yeah.
way they go to the bar, they don't end up, codependent with some bad partner. I don't want that. I was lucky to get that process. And I don't feel as bad to project that on everybody. And it's not for everybody. I mean, you have to have a constitution about you. I mean, you've been through a belt test, you've been through our style. It's not for everybody, but it means something to you.
Yeah. So your dad passes. At this
Mhm.
time, were you guys still in the midst of thinking about moving? Because were you guys were in Washington at this time
Yeah. So we moved back.
to
Sorry.
Arizona?
Yeah, we moved back to Arizona and I went back to
Okay.
being a cop on the same police department, the same beat, right where I left off the day that I started. It blew me away. So I came back, and, I called up and I said, "Hey guys, my wife wants to move back. Is there a possibility you guys would hire me back?" And they said, "We would absolutely love it. All you have to do is challenge post. You'll be working by January." I was like, "Oh wow." So we packed up everything we had in a trailer that was overloaded for our car, drove over the pass, pulled into Bullhead, and everybody just kind of welcomed us with open arms, like our old friends. And they got back in the department, and I didn't want to be there, but I know my wife wanted to be there. And so I sucked it up and went, and there was a lot of, "Oh, I guess the grass wasn't greener on the other side." And I'm like, "No, it was literally and figuratively greener. It was all, yeah. Why are you here?" "Because my wife wants to be here." And they were like, "Okay." So I had a lot of people just kind of crap on that situation, but
Mm.
I was back with my close friends.
Yeah. Did you get right back into narcotics and SWAT, or were you normal police day-to-day work?
Normal police, normal patrolman duties. And right away, my buddy was running the SWAT team and asked me, "Would you come back on the SWAT team?" And I said no. And there were a lot of guys on the SWAT team that were good and that I liked, but my eyes were open. I was a different person.
Mhm.
Uh,
Did your
and
family have a big impact on that?
no, no,
What made you make that decision?
when I was on the SWAT team, I thought we were the pinnacle of like tactical excellence. And then I had moved to training at a really high level for 7, 8 years with the best in the business. And we were shooting and doing things different than everybody was doing them. And my department hadn't moved on since I left. It was the same place. Nothing had changed in 8 years. And so I showed up and they handed me my Glock. And they were like, "Hey man, do you have your kit? You want to come shoot?" My buddy was like, "You want to come shoot with the SWAT team? That's an honor, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'd love to." And he's like, "Yeah, you'll see some of the boys. There's a lot of new guys, but you'll see the boys. It'll be cool." "Yeah, sure." So literally opened my box, boom, took my gun out, loaded it up, went out there and we shot our quals. And I outshot the entire SWAT team in half the time. And they were like, I watched all the heads. "What is going on?" It was like a RoboCop moment. Like, what is this? And I was like, "Oh man, it's training. It's just training." And I'm not that good. It was just, they hadn't come out. And then, my buddy who was running the team, Brad, I always looked up to Brad. I still look up to Brad. Um, but Brad was like, "What are you doing different?" And I was like, "It's these new tactics on how to handle recoil mitigation and target acquisition, and just try this, just a little grip change." And I'm like, "Dude, I've been shooting 1,000 rounds a day
Mhm.
for God knows how long, for the whole time I was in Afghanistan. The whole time I was a firearms instructor. I was just shooting all the time." So,
Yeah.
I mean, it just is what it is. And he was like, "You got to be kidding me." And the more I was teaching, because when I left Seattle the first time, I was teaching jujitsu at Belton's first gym. So that way I wouldn't have to pay gym dues, because gym dues were crazy up there. And I had to pay for my whole family. So I was teaching a kids class for him, and then I would teach his full class a couple days a week. So I was getting used to training again, like teaching. And I was teaching when I was overseas. And when you teach peers, it's different than teaching subordinates, because you don't have any authorities and you're teaching people that are competent. You're used to giving more respect, and you should do that all the time. You shouldn't talk down to anybody. And so I'm teaching, I'm showing them these new techniques, and they were like, "Whoa," and they were absorbing every bit of it instead of the old way of teaching, right? And so Brad was like, "Hey, dude, I really want you to come on the team." And I was like, I'm not going to do it." And he was like, "What are these new things?" So me and him, I was on his shift for a little while, and he was the sergeant, and I was showing him all the stuff that I was doing. I was turning him on to new things, and gunsmithing. And I knew Brad is the kind of guy that he's like, if there's something out there that's better, I'm going to find it. And so
Right.
when he did, oh man, Brad took that whole team and took them into the ANOA standard. I mean, literally doubled their efficacy, did so much for them. And Brad turned into a world-class shooter, like willed himself to do this, and sought out all these things. He's a rifle instructor at all these new symposiums that are all over Arizona, and then started a gunsmithing company. And
Initially, Roland, you had 7 years on the police force before you left. What was the time frame of when you were doing international security versus security in Washington?
7 years. It was about 7 years for take. And
Okay.
then
Then came
um,
back to the police
came
force.
back to the police force.
How many years did you do that?
So we got there and I did it for a year. It was a little over a year. I think I'm like 2 months shy of my 10-year mark altogether. And then went through that year. A lot had happened in that year. And then just, you know, me and my wife looked at each other and I said, I am not going to be able to make the money or be home enough to be with the kids to give them a better future. And I said, I need to go back into the private sector so that way we can have a better life. And she goes, you're right. It was not a mistake. We had to go there to tie up some loose ends, but it was a
You
good,
don't know until you know either. I mean, you guys made the leap and tried to see if that was the best for your family, and then you ultimately you got to
yeah.
figure it out in the
Oh,
moment.
totally. Totally. And then when we made it back, um, or when we decided, like that was the way to go, um, we got a lot of pushback from a lot of people and they were like, dude, you're going to start over again? And I'm like, dude, I'll start over every day. If it's, if it gets my family ahead, I'll start over every day. I'm like, this department doesn't care about me. This never cared about me. Never going to care about me. I said, if I'm going to go to the chief and I'm going to ask the chief, hey, if you can pay me, because they said they were going to pay me at the level of what I left at, that whatever that level is, they were going to pay me at that. Nope. They said, oh, sorry, we couldn't pass it through the city manager. And I said, okay. So I got hired as a new guy instead of a lateral. I knew all the guys that were training me, I had trained. So, which is kind of wild. You know what I mean? Like some of the guys were auxiliary officers that I had talked into becoming a cop. You know what I mean? It's crazy. So,
Mm-hmm.
and it, nothing had changed. So it was really interesting. And we had done a lot of really cool things. And
So when
I
you
just,
guys moved back to Washington, were you able to, you know, get a security position right away?
yeah. So I told a friend, I texted him and said, hey, I'm looking to come back in the private sector. Do you know of anything? And he goes, oh man, Google's looking for people. I said, okay. I said, I don't know if I want to go back to Seattle, but maybe between California and Seattle. So I was interviewing with Google's EP team and my boss was calling me in the middle. My old boss was calling me in the middle of it. And I'm like, oh my God, he has to know that I'm on an interview right now. Like, and so I called him back afterwards and I was like, dude, why were you calling me? And he goes, come on, you want to come back to Seattle. Okay. And I go, I kind of need this. This is my level that I need to be. And he goes, no problem. I'll pay you 10% over that. I'll pay for your cost for relocating. And I was like, okay, all right. Well, it's good enough for me. So we went and then, and I talked to Belton and Belton was like, hey man, like I had some issues with my gym, and my, my investors. So I don't have a spot for you to teach over here, but in West Seattle, there's a spot for you to teach over there because we're all connected now. I said, sure. And that's when I met the owner over there and then started teaching over there when I came back to Microsoft. And then I would kind of make a loop. We moved to Auburn. I drove from Auburn to the east side and worked and then drove from there to West Seattle, taught a few classes, and then I'd come home. And I made that triangle, it's like almost 100-mile loop for years.
Dang. So when you guys moved back to Arizona, where were you at with training wise? 'Cause I'm assuming you just picked things right back up with Rick
Mhm.
in Arizona. And then where did you go training from there before you went back to Washington? So what levels were you at throughout that process?
So when I went back as an officer, I was a brown belt.
Okay.
And that was a sobering thing because the difference between because I was a patrolman with no jujitsu and then the same job, same everything as a brown belt, it was like being a Jedi. Like it was so weird. You could get so close to people and talk to them. As long as you can touch them, you know that you're solid, right? And so you can convey so much more empathy when you know that you can handle yourself as long as you can touch somebody.
Mm.
And it was so good to do police work that way that you came across as somebody who really cared instead of somebody who was an authoritarian figure.
So de-escalation became much easier for you.
So much easier. And then, we had a lot of big things happen and they were non-issues. I mean, I used to come home and I've thrown away so many uniforms because there was blood and pepper spray and other types of bodily fluids on them. And then as a brown belt, no, like never lost my name tag. You know what I mean? And I was in all kinds of scuffs and it was just easier. And it
Mm.
sounds crazy, but it changed everything. When I was, young and badge heavy and stupid, I had every piece of kit you could get. I mean, it had all the different cuffs and all the different this and taser, this, that. And I had so much stuff. It was ridiculous. I wanted to be as tactical as possible. And when I went back for my year and a half, I wore class A's. I didn't carry a less lethal on my kit except for a ring for a baton. I didn't, none of it. And people were like, what is this crazy? And I was like, no, dude, I'm a professional. I'm here to help people, you
Mm.
know? And it was wild. I would show up on calls and people instantly assumed that I was the supervisor, even though I didn't have any stripes because I was squared away. I talked to people with respect. I didn't have to curse at anybody. And there was a lot of times where people knew who I was because I had trained with them. They were fighters that had, gone astray and got hooked on dope and this and that.
Did you
Other
do
ops,
any teaching in Arizona, or were you just strictly back into the training mindset?
just training. Just training. And even when I came back, this might seem crazy. I don't like teaching. I'm not really a big fan of teaching. I've never really been a big fan of teaching. Yeah, I'd rather take class. But if you're the highest belt in class, you're the one teaching, right?
Yeah.
So, that's what you're supposed to do. And so it's kind of funny. A lot of people have asked me like, oh, wow, you must love teaching. And I'm like, I know. They're like, you own the gym. Yeah. Yeah.
Here we are.
Here we are, and, but it's just a responsibility,
So
so
that's nice that you were able to keep that connection with Belton.
yeah.
How did you guys initially meet? Like, how did you guys get connected before you left to Arizona?
We were training with Miriam Cardoso in Redmond, and his gym in Factoria was affiliated with, it was an elite gym, which was Miriam, Professor Jessica, and Professor Andrea. They were all part of that. And they're phenomenal ladies, man. They're like multiple time world champions between all of them. Great jiu-jitsu. And it was so expensive to have my family train. And we were really lean money-wise because we were paying for 2 households and stuff like that. And it was just the
Yeah.
situation. And one day we were training and Belton was like, hey, you do everything different. What's up with that? And Belton's a real open-minded dude. And so I rolled with him a few times and he's like, dude, this is different. Like, this is different. And he goes, hey, come to my gym. And if you teach a class over here, he goes, I'll comp everything. And I was like, oh, dude, that's really nice. Thanks, man. And he's a very family oriented guy.
Mm-hmm.
So we got along great, and he liked my tempo. He liked our style, and it just made sense to him. And he was like, "This is really cool." And that's when I met Sean Shuey. Sean Shuey had never done jujitsu before, and he was
Mm-hmm.
doing his first couple classes. And he was like, "Hey," he's like, "What are you guys doing?" I said, "Oh, we're going over some judo." And he goes, "Oh, you guys judo too?" And I was like, "It's all the same, man." And so, I have pictures of the first day he did jujitsu and just hucking him across the room. And he was like, "This is awesome." So I was
So
telling
did
him,
you start by training kids,
um,
or did you go right into adults? Both.
I think both.
Okay.
Yeah. Actually, the first people I was like really training was overseas. They were all the contractors that were like CrossFit nuts. And I didn't have a ton of people at first. I had a couple guys that would rotate in that were like purple belts, brown belts that were pretty good, but I needed consistency. So I took a bunch of dudes and crash coursed them. And then I would just train with them all the time.
Mm.
Um, and they were great training partners. We would train on top of the consulate sometimes in the middle of the night on the rooftop of our villa. And you can see the citadel behind it and the
Yes.
minarets. That day we were training and going over judo. And if you look to the left, there's a hill and there's a farmer over there. And there was 2 kids that were up on a scooter, sitting on the scooter, looking at us, watching, like, what are they doing? And we could see them. And then about halfway into practice, we watched them start throwing each other on the ground. It was such a weird thing. It was such a weird thing. And you meet the coolest people doing jujitsu, and you just realize how um
Universal it can be too.
how just we're all the same. We're just all there's you can't ignore it. We're all the same. And it was just really cool. I was like, wow. When I came back and kind of rehooked up with Belton and started training in West Seattle, that was a different chapter. It was a different community. West Seattle's kind of got its own vibe, and it met such an amazing set of people there. The owner, they were super kind to us. She was building her business, and she's got a lot of confidence, and she really knocked it out of the park. She did a really good job. My training style, she liked for quite a bit. We, fundamentally we're different people. So she wanted to take her gym in one direction, and like my tracks are laid, right? So they're just kind of different, just different areas. And so, right around COVID kind of exacerbated that. And
And is that when everything kind of transitioned? You guys moved from West Seattle to Bellevue
yeah, so
location?
so Belton had left and did his own deal, and he had been doing his own deal for a little while, and I couldn't go and teach for him because I was too busy at West Seattle. And then COVID happened, everything shut down, and everybody's doing speakeasy roles. And in West Seattle, they were really following the guidance correctly. They were doing exactly what the state wanted them to do, and I'm just not wired that way. I'm like, hey, look, I don't have anybody. I don't have anybody that's you know. Uh, high risk in my circle, and not, mentally I can't not roll. And I said, I got one speed. And then, so I was rolling a lot with Belton. And then, me and Tony had a falling out, and they were looking for other avenues of professors. And I was like, hey, go for it. I support you. And then I left. I just kept kind of training, and Belton's like, well, if you're here, I mean, you can always teach here. And I'm like, dude, I'm just here to roll. And that place was packed. I mean, there were so many people in there during COVID. It was awesome. It was just tons of black belts, tons of brown belts from all over the place. And Belton just opened his doors, and he didn't get any COVID relief funds. He just opened his doors and said, hey, look, like this is for you guys. You guys can all train here for free. Like, I'll eat it. You got to keep the community good. And Belton did a solid. So I told Belton, I said,
Wow.
hey, I'll teach for you until you get your black belt, and I'll run a program for you until you teach your black belt. And he was like, okay. And he was, well, because I didn't have anywhere to train, but
Mhm.
solid for so many people. Like, I was like, I got you. So we did. And,
That's great.
yeah, so and I started teaching there. And things started opening back up. A lot of the people were going back to their old gyms, we knew that was going to happen. But it was packed. It was still packed all the time. And then, a lot of people that I trained in West Seattle on their way over and still train with us today. I mean, it was kind of serendipitous how everything kind of fell. And I was always looking to open a gym in a town that I lived in, but we hadn't really fully settled in a town.
Well, and that was what I was going to ask is, you kind of started settling into a routine with Belton and at Warrior Strength. What initially inspired you to go for it and open up Journeyman Grappling in Ording?
My wife, she said, hey, so I'm going to sign our kids up over at Logic, really good jiu-jitsu place in Spanaway. And I went, what? And I'm like, wait, what? "I- I'll teach the kids," because she was bringing the kids all the way up to Bellevue. I went, wait, that's crazy. And she goes, you're not here. And I went, wow, okay. She goes, you're going to open a gym this year, and I'm doing all the stuff, and I'm going to open it. So whether you teach at it or not, I don't care. And I was like, wow. I was like, all right. So like I said, my wife's my superpower. And we were looking for so many places. And um, we, one day we got into a huge argument, and I was so mad. And I had to just drive. I had to leave the house. So I left the house and parked at the park downtown. And sometimes when I do that, I'll just sit there and I'll just draw what I'm looking at. And it's like cathartic, right? And I drew just what I was looking at, right? And we were looking for a space. So this was like in the back of my mind, we're never going to get this started. We're never going to this, we're never going to that. And then I'm sitting there, and I'd made all these plans and drawn all these things to set up. And then I drew this. It's kind of hard to see.
Okay.
That is Journeyman Grappling.
What on earth?
Crazy. About a month after this, that used to be an old pharmacy, and we just happened to bump into the owners, and they were super nice people. That was a pharmacy for like 60 years, and they shut it down during COVID, and they were like, oh yeah, actually we're looking to rent this place. I was shocked. I was like, oh wow, this is a good space. It's like 110 years old. It's right in the middle of town. Totally unbeknownst to me that was exactly what I drew. And they said, okay, yeah, we'll have it ready for you in 2 weeks. What? Yeah, 2 weeks. And I was like, there's no way. Yep, 2 weeks. They had it all set up. So we scrambled to get funding, and all our life savings we poured into it. And we did everything the way that we wanted to do it. We didn't skimp. We built a floating floor. The best judo mats you can find. Yeah. And it was, exactly the way we wanted it. And yeah, it was very very serendipitous on how it just all just fell into place.
And starting a gym is no easy task. And so,
No.
what were some of the biggest challenges and what kept you going?
We are surrounded by really good people. We've trained so hard with so many people. You really get to know them, and people show up. People just show up, and they want to see you succeed. Everybody at our gym wants to see you win, and everybody was excited. I mean, our opening day was our opening practice. We had like 65 people on the mat, and most of them drove an hour and a half one way just to be there, and they still do. So it's crazy. People drive by 5 gyms to come to our gym. It's wild, and it's for each other, and just a big family. So when we had to build everything, everybody just showed up. When we had to design it, everybody showed up, and my
Mhm.
kids, my wife, like sleepless nights of just knocking it out, and never once were we nervous. We're like, no, this is just going to happen. It was just a um, very deliberate, like, no, this is happening, and it was pretty wild. My wife set that tone, and then when we started, I never worried that we wouldn't have people. I'm like, this is like jujitsu's great. Why wouldn't
Yeah,
this kid want to do jujitsu? So and they just kept showing up.
that's
You know,
amazing. And I know you initially started off with jujitsu classes, and now I just saw recently that your gym offers striking, wrestling, group fitness, first responder defensive tactics.
yeah,
Can you kind of explain how that expansion process worked since opening? Because you guys are doing a lot now since your opening day.
yeah. So it's big. So I was always against striking. I was like, I don't. This is a grappling house. There's no striking because I've never liked striking culture. I'm just not a fan of it. Between Muay Thai and kickboxing, like I love doing it, but I don't have an ACL on my left knee. My right knee's thrashed. I don't have any lateral stability. Like most people wouldn't realize that I do because I protect it really well. But if I step open to kick and open my knee, it falls. If my knee falls out, I fall down. So it's frustrating. But as far as the culture in striking, you get a lot of people that don't realize you can get on your bicycle and get your breath. You get popped a couple times, bam, bam, okay. Ooh, all right, shake out the cobwebs, I'm good. You're not under pressure the whole time. It's more pugilistic. Jiu-jitsu it's everyone's worst fear. You're drowning under pressure. You're in quicksand. I mean, being burnt alive, drowning is probably the worst. And you're in that feeling all the time, being crushed and can't breathe. And you can't get on your bicycle and run away. And you watch people try to do both. And I have a lot of respect for people that train both because they're kind of two different worlds. But the people that try jujitsu, they're like, nah, I'm more of a striker. No, you're not. No, you're not. You're not doing jujitsu because it's horrifying. It's the boogeyman. It is absolutely your worst fears. And you're like, I'm just not going to face my fears. But this is still gives me street cred, right? You know what I mean? And so that culture bothers me where you get a bunch of folks that, they get a they get a class, they get an identity, and then it kind of morphs if their crew guy doesn't keep them in check. It turns in just a bunch of people that have their shirt off and sweaty and like to yell a lot and smack pads and feel badass and don't clean the mats and because they don't lay on them. So they're not cleaning mats for the next class and they're not showing respect to the room and they're not respecting the jujitsu people because they're just a bunch of people in pajamas and they have no idea that it becomes two separate cultures. I'm like, I don't want that in my gym at all. And I've seen that in a lot of gyms. I don't want that at my gym at all.
So, how, as you kind of dabbled and started to bring in some of these other practices and classes, how are you maintaining that culture and environment?
So we laid the culture with only having grappling for the first couple years. And then so many people want to do striking. And the people that have really, really reached out for striking, there are a lot of people that are family members of the people that are grappling or some of the younger grapplers, and they need to have the striking with the same culture as the grappling, right? The same respect, the same everything. And it's also got to be fun. So we treat the kickboxing more like an upbeat, like fitness kickboxing. Instead of just having fun and doing like a 9 rounds thing, it's technical. So you're actually learning really good Muay Thai and Dutch kickboxing, but it feels lighter. So you're not walking out of there feeling like, oh, I'm a badass. Like, no, man, I had a great workout. That was so much fun.
Sure.
And so that's the vibe that comes out of that class. So that vibe I'm good with, but I don't want somebody walking out of there puffing their chest. Confidence is one thing, but
Keeping
they,
ego in check as you're
yeah,
starting to merge into these other practices.
yeah, that's a huge thing. And they're doing a good job of it. And then the functional fitness, like we have guys that are 70 years old in our functional fitness class, and it's a lot of it's body weight and there's a lot of resting. And hey, we want you to be healthy and stay alive. We want your quality of life to be good. So
Yeah,
we're absolutely not going to discriminate against anybody, but we are going to push you because we're not there to be comfortable. And so we attract people that are very comfortable with being uncomfortable or want to
sure.
be in. So there's a lot of growth in the gym, which is really nice. I think a lot of people don't realize, especially like gym owners, there's an element of you have some people in the gym where you're selling people to come into the gym and do a sport, and then all of a sudden they leave and you're like, oh well, retention, right? We lost somebody, but you don't know why that happened. And with jujitsu, especially, it's hard, but there's a lot of growth that comes out of somebody in jujitsu. You start progressing in your belts, you're a different person. You function different in the world. You may not even notice it, but everyone else will. And when that happens and you're progressing and self-improving and your spouse isn't, that can cause friction. Or your kids are doing all this great stuff and your spouse is and you're not, all of a sudden there's like animosity and then it creates something weird and then they leave, right? But when everyone trains together, it is an amazing like empathy bridge that's built because you have a respect for your spouse, you have a respect for your kids because you guys are watching each other deal with failure, do hard things, and you have this common thing to talk about that's
Mhm.
so engaging that it's a passion. And it really brings you together. It's not an upsell thing. It's literally like, hey man, if you want this kind of improvement forever, you both got to do it. Like you really got to. I'm just saying, you both got to do it.
Yeah. Well, and it's cool because you guys clearly practice what you preach. As you were sending some of the photos over, it was just crushed my heart. The one where all of your kids are in the singlets. I was like, oh my gosh, you've got to be kidding me. This
That's
is just
awesome.
precious. But, it definitely seems like that's been a huge part of your family as you guys have really gotten to see the benefits of wrestling training together. When did Jonna make the leap?
When she decided to open the gym, she said, I'm not going to talk the talk. I got to walk it.
That's
And
awesome.
she's been at every practice that I've been at forever. You know what
Yeah.
I
So
mean?
she
Like,
knew what the gym culture was like in that
yeah,
environment.
she's got a brown belt brain. Just her body just needed time to catch up, and she progresses so fast. And so when she was ready for her blue belt, she didn't progress in her blue belt really fast, but she got there in normal time. But her understanding of weight distribution and how to be heavy and how to use her hips, dude, she's a nightmare to roll with. And she's super tough and she's super competitive. So she puts the hurting on a lot of people and she doesn't expect it. And she always kind of like minimizes her rolling and I see it, and I'm like, no, you're doing really good. And she played that part for a little while of like, from I'll learn jujitsu, but not from you. Like she can't hear anything from me, right? So okay, all right, okay. So I'll show a move and I'll look over and she's like, ah, ah, and I'm like, okay. It's like, and on her own time. And now, she has her own community of, there's so many blue belt, moms that are monsters that they all, basically progressed up together. They're all
Yeah,
friends, and then also so many brown belt, women. They're just, it's a big friend group
for
of
sure.
with a lot of trust and that's huge. That's huge for, for a woman training is trust because it's a very intimate sport, very uncomfortable, intimate sport. And she's really adopted it and it's hers now, which is cool. So
That's
I told her, I
great.
said, hey, you better hurry up and get the black belt because if I croak, you got to run this place. So.
Well, and how do you feel like you've officially found a balance between coaching, gym owner, husband, father, community leader, all the things? How are you managing just balance in general as you wear all these different hats?
Oh no balance at all. No, not at all. Not at all. Because like there's wants and needs, right? And your want versus need is huge. And I want to do a lot of things, but the things that I need to do sometimes are uncomfortable, sometimes make me sacrifice some sleep, sometimes make me sacrifice a lot of other things. And I got a pretty high work drive. So if I'm not working, I feel like I'm dying. And if I'm not going forward, I feel like I'm sinking. So, that I think that manages my natural anxiety. And I don't try my best to not pay attention to what anybody else is doing, what any other school is doing, because I believe in what we're doing and I see the results in people's lives. And when we go to tournaments, we do just fine. We got some monsters in there, and our room is a tough room. I mean, I hear it all the time where we get visitors and they're like, dude, this is the deepest room I've ever been in. And I'm like, that's a bold statement. That's a really bold statement. And they're like, dude, there's no easy round in here. And I was like, well, yeah, I guess, you go to some gyms and unless you're at, black belt only or brown, purple and above advanced only, yeah, those are deep rooms, I guess, but our room's deep all the time. So we got really lucky. We've got a lot of people that were really high level grapplers before they even got there. But when I think about the hats I have to wear now, it's facilitating more when I'm teaching. There's times where because I try to roll every class, but there's some classes where it's packed. There's not a lot of room and I have to sit back and really watch and kind of make notes on everyone and their progressions. And I see what people are missing so I can start adjusting curriculum. And it's a little taxing, but that's kind of what I should be doing sometimes. So that way I can provide better instruction for everybody.
Yeah.
So, and it's also, I found it's a new, it's a new thing that fills my cup. Now, there have been days where I've had to have people cover for me because I'm doing some other stuff, protection details or whatever. And, I'll walk in and I'll watch the kids class, being taught by Eileen and Alex and, sometimes John will jump in there and Sophia and Zach and my family's on the mat teaching jujitsu. And it's heartwarming. And then
Yeah.
Pedro and Alden and all the guys and Eddie and Shuey are teaching the adult class. And I'm like, this is like so cool. Like
It's coming full circle.
yeah. And it's good to see that the culture is still on track. Everybody still believes in it. And this is a major part of their lives. That's why I didn't name the gym like Roland Gutierrez's blah, blah, blah jiu-jitsu. I'm the least important person in that room, always. That's how it's supposed to be. Our gym and our training is going to outlast me and hopefully goes on generations and generations. And somebody will pick up the torch and do what they're supposed to do in their community. And that's the point. That's the point. It's why it's called Journeyman Grappling, because you're never going to master it. And you're always a journeyman. You're always going to have to put in the work. You always got to get better. It's literally it is a blue collar job. It is absolutely a blue collar job. So, yeah, managing the different hats is not.
Well,
Not
that's
easy.
a cool story behind the name of the gym. I didn't realize that. Can you walk me through the background and the start of your logo?
Yeah. So it was a morale patch and my dad died and I came back and in the quiet times is when you think about and you're just boom, you just get overwhelmed with emotion. You're just quiet times would get you. And, I'm sitting at my desk. We'd have to do these shifts at a podium, at Microsoft where you have to make sure nobody goes into executive spaces. So we always had to kind of have that crappy couple hours up front. And so I'd finished up all my data and I mean, I'm not really good with technology. So I had PowerPoint up and PowerPoint has a paint function that is easy for me to figure out. And I have to make PowerPoints all the time for presentations on training and stuff. So I just started doodling and, in the Mexican culture, sugar skulls and the Day of the Dead, the way Mexicans look at Catholicism, it's a little different. So when the Spanish came over, they adopted Catholicism, but they kind of held some things back from their ancient religions. So like if you look at the Virgin Mary in that fresco, and then you look at Our Lady of Guadalupe, they should be identical, right? But the wings are black on the Mexican one for Our Lady of Guadalupe because it's a hat tip to ancient Mexican gods. So they kept their culture kind of hidden in that. And same thing with Day of the Dead, right? That's not a Catholic thing at all. And their idea of ofrendas and remembering people that have passed, right? That's not a Catholic thing. Catholics, yeah, I mean, obviously, they believe, there's purgatory, there's hell, and then there's heaven. There's not like two deaths and things like that, right? So it eventually evolves into this culture. And on Day of the Dead, you have you decorate sugar skulls of family members that have passed and you celebrate them. So they're remembered and so that they're with you on that day. And growing up, I didn't I didn't observe this. I didn't know of it real well, but as I got older, and especially when I was working narcotics, and we were dealing with a lot of Mexican cartel stuff and a lot of spiritual stuff in drug trafficking, right? We're opened up to Mexican culture much more. So long story longer, I wanted my dad to come with me because my dad didn't understand jiu-jitsu. He understood wrestling. He loved wrestling. My mom too. It would be, at every wrestling tournament. And then the next day, my mom's sore, so sore, my neck. And I'm like, why? And she goes, because when you're wrestling, I'm going, oh, get him, go. And then she's all twisted up the next day. Same thing with my dad. And my dad, I can still, there were times in Afghanistan where I'd work out really hard in the middle of the night. And I could hear him, yell, come on, Ro. Like I hear him in my ear. Like he was there echoing like I was in, like he was there. And so, it kind of bummed me out that when I started jujitsu, he didn't understand it. I go, he come to a tournament and he go, oh man, it's so cool. But it looked like you were losing. You were on the bottom and then the guy just fell asleep. And it was just crazy. It was just, I didn't get it, but it was so cool, and I was like, yeah, Dad, but he was already sick by then. I always wanted him to really understand it so he could enjoy it because he really would. And so I made that patch. That patch is him. It's my dad, and the Arizona Rays are behind it. And a lot of when I made it, I would put that patch on my ribs, like a big morale patch. And I made 5 of them because patches are pretty expensive. It's kind of a random thing to get. And everybody's like, oh, dude, I love that patch. I want that patch. And I was like, okay, I'll order some more. And then all of a sudden those patches started showing up in class. We had big classes in Seattle, 60 people. It was pretty normal. And then everybody had the patch. And I was like, so cool. Like, I get to take my dad with me and I see my dad everywhere. So like, it's kind of cool. And then, when we opened the gym, it was just kind of, I think that's our patch. It's always been for me a way to remember my dad because I never want him to go away. And even in our gym, we have an ofrenda. We have pictures of a lot of my friends that have passed away, that they died overseas or they died at work. And then my dad's right in the middle. So that sits there because when you're working really hard, a lot of people that probably would have loved to be working hard too, but they're not around anymore. So it's a good kind of gut check. Like, all right, I'm not going to take this round off. I'm not going to do this, because you can be a hobbyist or you can treat things the way you should and you'll get the best out of it. And that's kind of just an extra little way. So that became our patch.
Very cool. I was thinking about as far as traditions, because that was a big eye opener to me is when I moved up to Seattle, your guys' gym felt so traditional compared to what I initially, walked into my very first experience with BJJ. And so some of the traditions that you have in place, some that come to mind are, making sure that you know your lineage, bowing on and off the mats, the way that you approach belt testing days. Are all of those learned, and did you take those away from Rick? I mean, was that something that you already had gained from his training that have just kind of initially been passed down to you versus what are some of the traditions that are newer to your culture that you just have evolved as a gym owner?
I try not to change much. Rick is he got his black belt in judo as well at the Kodokan. So he enjoys tradition. I enjoy tradition too, because, just like when people get married, some people want to write their own vows, and that's great. Sometimes it's a train wreck, but, there's something really intimate that is timeless when people give traditional vows that have been said for, hundreds of years. And it's like, it's an echoing promise, right? So when you have a traditional element to your gym, the most of the traditional stuff, like bowing on and off the mat, that's very judo. And we did that with Rick, and I hung on every word that Rick said. And sometimes Rick would go, oh, did I say that? Because, he just doesn't, he doesn't think much about it. And, you bleed on that mat. Parts of you die on that mat 100%. And to not give it the respect, man, that's blasphemous. People that just walk on the mat, it makes my skin crawl. I have never walked on the mat without bowing on the mat, ever. And even on a wrestling mat, I bow on a wrestling mat. My kids bow on the wrestling mat. It's just a thing. And that respect is very intense because the change that it's made in my life, I don't ever want to discount that and think that I figured it out. I'm smarter than that. Absolutely not. To me, that's the same mechanism that makes a religious person an atheist. I know better. No, you don't. No, you don't. Stop it. Your lineage is important because if you don't know where you came from, you don't know where you're going. You have no idea. You have no idea why your jujitsu is the way it is. And you can overlook it and think, oh, I don't need to waste my time. People are paying me for techniques to teach them techniques. They're not learning this, then you just sharpened everything down to a sport and you're out of the art, right? And there's two parts of jujitsu that are super important. You have the techniques that obviously work, but then you have the novella, the story. And if you know the story and how things are made, you can kind of see the dogma. But if you don't, you might be practicing dogma, absolutely practicing dogma, like pulling guard. You pull guard in a street fight, and people have done it and been successful. It's not favored. You don't get points for pulling guard in a tournament for a reason. It's its own reward. Guard is a necessity and it's very powerful, but you absolutely want to be on top. And anybody who argues that, you're feeding into a dogma. And all you got to do is look at the first people that were fighting in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, how they were winning. And they weren't winning on bottom. They're winning on top. Hickson's winning on top. Everybody's winning on top. They can win from the bottom, absolutely. But it's a mousetrap. They prefer to be on top. So that understanding of the novella is important. And then not hanging any medals anywhere. That's a very old school thing. If you go into a judo gym and into a real gym, you won't find medal. You'll find a medal room where there's trophies and things, but you won't find it on the mat space because it's like idolatry. That's not, a lot of people think that competition is the measure for how good you are. And it's not. And practice is the tool for competition. It's the other way around. Competition is the tool that you gain your experience of what you weren't doing, where your holes are, the things that you should be focusing on. That's your tool to guide your training, because the hardest matches you'll ever have are always in the room, always. And it's artificial to sit there and look at your opponent and get ready for a fight. But that's artificial. When you get into a fight, it's surprise fight. It's always, it's how it is. It's the way it's most likely. Competition is fun. Competition is awesome. Competition is super beneficial, but it's not the measure. That's not the measure. Jiu-Jitsu is not that standardized yet. I don't think the rule set's that standardized or done well enough, which it's really hard to make a rule set for Jiu-Jitsu. And I think it's a good rule set. I don't think it's where it needs to be to truly be the standard. Otherwise, Jiu-Jitsu world champions would all be MMA world champions. They're not. So, I mean, Jiu-Jitsu it's still got some growing pains ahead of it, but I still think it's the best thing in the world. Still do.
Are there any traditions or practices or just aspects of the culture that you'd like to see evolve?
I'd like to see people kind of go back to tradition. I'd like to see more respect. Wrestling's done the same thing. They want a show because they want viewership, because it equals money and support. The older I get, the more purist I get. It's tough. It's really tough. I'd like to see people go through the most exciting exchange of technique with a ton of heart shown, and then afterwards shake each other's hand and in respect, not tear their jacket off and slap their chest and it's like, dude, act like you've done this before. We know you wanted this. Act like you've done this before. And also, don't talk trash. I mean, everybody talks trash to hype a fight. It's not boxing. And this generation loves that. It's a silly conversation. It's just a silly conversation. But the bad part is the younger generation doesn't realize how silly it is because this is their entry into the sport. So your white belts that are coming up have a really bad basis of general knowledge and general opinion, and it's hard because like then they come in and then they're like, oh, you kind of seem like an Elmer Fudd, like old, thinking, and you're just like, okay. And then once they realize what's going on, then it takes them a while, but once they get it, they're like, I see. Okay, I see. So I would just like to see more respect. I would like to see less hype on kids competing. Like there's so much biodiversity in kids. Like whoever's a world champion at 7 years old is not going to be a world champion as an adult. They're not, because you burned them out. Guess what? Your 7-year-old that's winning world champions. Newsflash, he's probably more athletic than everybody else anyways. He's just going to win anyways. So as everyone catches up, it's really going to frustrate him because he thought he was unstoppable. And dude, he's 7. Like stop making kids, stop taking the lesson of jiu-jitsu away from kids and making them little rock stars. I don't think it's healthy.
Sure.
So I'd like to see that stop. But to be honest with you, like my opinions just are like a grain of sand, it'll blow away. And I really don't give it that much thought because I just worry about what we do and
Yeah.
our influence, and we're going to keep doing it the way we think is right.
Yeah. And I think too, it makes sense with your background, Roland, why you do some of this additional first responder defensive tactics. Are you affiliated with PJJ?
Yeah. So yeah, Chad's a buddy of mine. Yeah. Yeah.
And
So
so
we
PJJ is police jujitsu.
police jujitsu, and the C4C is called Code Force Concepts. It's the same program.
Okay.
And so we do things a little different than Chad does it. So Chad does his setup for police departments as defensive tactics systems, because it's a full system and it's all jujitsu. It's just aligned to fit because it works, and it's the best for that. We use that when I was on a security team for a high net worth individual and family. Our guys, our EP guys, I taught it to them. The reason why we used it is because it's the most humane and it's the best. It passes the eye test. You know, it doesn't look bad. And it minimizes any type of liability because jujitsu is just most efficient. And all those guys train jujitsu anyway, so it was an easy adoption.
Hmm.
Not like Krav Maga where everything's a nut kick and an eye gouge. Like if you were protecting somebody who's high profile and you did that, you get fired in a heartbeat and you'd end up on the news. So like that's not how you handle a problem. So PJJ fit perfect. And so we used Chad's system, and Chad's a phenomenal person, great cop. He's a Metro cop, and I have the utmost respect for him. He's a good person.
So
And
do you set up classes for them, or do you go to these, is this like setup training that you have through these programs?
no, so Chad would come out and do stuff for our team, but I would do all the sustainment training, and then my gym affiliated separately with him, so that way, like I'm a level 5 instructor for him, so I can run my own trainings. And because it's jujitsu and we've trained together, and he knows my competency, and we've trained together for so long, he gets that I have like a different vision for PJJ, because for him, his calling is to really get this adopted to so many police departments, because it's saving cops' lives. And very similar to Gracie Combatives, except I prefer this setup better than I prefer Gracie Combatives, just because of there's more added wrestling, and I think wrestling's underrated and definitely needed in arresting protocols for sure. Way more beneficial to stay on your feet. Chad's the lead jiu-jitsu instructor at Extreme Couture, Randy Couture's gym. And he trains with, world-class fighters all the time. And they use a lot of PJJ stuff, which is just jujitsu, in their fight camps. The little thing that I do different is at our gym, I'm looking at holistically, what is the problem, right? And the problem in defensive tactics is the administration. The administration looks at problems and then they silo them, and they go, okay, well, we have officers at a crazy rate destroying their lives, right? Tons of divorces, and they're killing themselves. And so we're going to have a resiliency program for that. So we're going to bring in psychologists for that. And then defensive tactics. We need them to not get hurt by other people, and we need them to not hurt other people. So we'll put that in that silo. And the funny thing is that they've been off the street for so long and they think of things so differently. They don't realize that there's one function that you have to just go to what is your mission statement? What is the mission statement of defensive tactics? To keep an officer safe. It has to keep an officer safe from other people, including themselves, which is the resiliency portion. So jiu-jitsu is the perfect, tons of cops train jiu-jitsu and they already know this, but it's getting cops to understand that you come into this program, like we run it, we call it saturation training, which you're supposed to show up and constantly train it. And they come in, and I put them in a gi. I make them wear a gi because it takes them out of their mindset and identity of being a cop, right? So they don't act like cops, and same thing with the firemen and security folks. And we also have any person that's first to crisis. So even church personnel, because how many pastors have somebody sit down and they're in crisis and they're going to lose their mind and they're possibly be attacked or deal with a suicide. So it's really good for them. So, you have this diverse group of people that are used to crisis, and now you take them out of their identity and you make an action or a function fun. So they're playing games of jujitsu. I'm showing them these games and techniques, and these techniques are defensive tactics forward, all PJJ. And then we play situational games, and the game feeds the competency to the technique. And they're all having a good time. It's just like jujitsu class. It's very similar to jujitsu. And then we also escalated up to actually using kit, for some of for police and security. They actually use our kit for weapon retentions, vehicle extraction. We have days for that. But we really focus on the basis of grappling, which that'll help you move way further than specific techniques, and also training like sparring in the game. So what it does is they get to go and sweat off the day of work, and they go home, and when their wives or their husbands ask them, "Hey, how was your day?" "Oh, it was great." "Oh, you didn't have a my day was fine. We're good. I'm here. I'm present." They're present with their children. They're present with their spouse. I mean, your spouse married the 10-year-old version of you. You don't really advance much more. The things that make you happy when you're 10 are really, that's like your core self, right? But then you layer on all this BS of your identity at your work and your job and how important you are. And they didn't marry that. And that this is what you carry with you when you're in a high stress job. And so you start growing apart. This helps you not, because you sweat it off. You sweat off that ego, that persona. It's gone now. That the stress is gone. So that helps that portion. And also the part where, people use their weapon against themselves. I know a couple cops that have done that. And the hard part is I understand how they got there. I completely understand how they got there. I've had friends ask me, "Hey man, I've been so close. We did the same stuff. How come you never got there?" And I'm like, dude, I went to jiu-jitsu. I went to jiu-jitsu and I sweat off toxic stuff that just eats your soul away. I said, that went out my pores, man. And that is the resiliency part, the defensive tactics that keeps you safe from you. That's that part. The byproduct is you get really good at the stuff that people attack you with. And you get good at arresting people, and you get good at controlling people, and you get good at not being hurt or hurting them. And you
Mhm.
get to use your technique without emotion to ramp up consequence, right? So you just get good at that human rodeo of wrapping people up, and okay, man, we're done to fight now. Can we be friends? Okay, let's go.
Yeah.
And you don't get sued, your department doesn't get sued, and you don't hurt yourself, and you made a bunch of friends. And then eventually you figure out, oh, I should just go to jiu-jitsu. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, go to jiu-jitsu.
That's
Yes.
great.
So that's the purpose
Have you
of our,
seen quite a bit of policemen start to join
yeah,
this
yeah,
since
with
you've started? Because I remember when I was going to classes, I met a few that were in the police force, and so I was just curious, has that grown over the years now?
yeah, quite a
Yeah.
bit. I mean, our school is very popular with law enforcement, private security, and firemen, not because they were just looking for a place to go, but our style of jujitsu, that old school style, really fits their work. And almost every class, "Hey, you don't remember that Kimura setup that you showed us in PJJ? I did it. I did it. Me and my buddy hooked some guy this way, and it was awesome. It was so fast. It was so that nobody got hurt. It was awesome."
Mhm.
And it makes me happy because, they're not hurt and they're standing in front of me, and,
Yeah.
I mean, even better, you have an officer and their wife both training at the same, the same place, and you watch them go through their belt tests, helping each other. And the amount of stress that a husband and wife in law enforcement, it's a pressure cooker. I couldn't fathom. And having them both have that mechanism to just sweat off that evil and be able to get back to your 10-year-old selves, to look at each other and laugh over a, bowl of popcorn, and be able to be present with your kids. That's huge. That's, to me, that's
Yeah.
what's the byproduct is you get in better shape. I mean, we got a bunch of cops and security guys that have lost, 30, 40 pounds, and they're like, dude, this is awesome. And really the hardest part is my job articulating this to, corporate organizations, law enforcement organizations, and administration, that, this serves a purpose. Because when you think you're really handling resiliency or self-defense, you're not really. You're giving them watered down versions of both, especially if you're talking to cops. If you send a psychologist to talk to a bunch of cops, I mean, I've heard psychologists say the most amazing things. And you know what we all did? You ain't a cop. How do you know? And you just shut off. You're not a cop. You don't know. It's the hardest part about teaching cops. Firemen are similar, military are very similar. It's a rough job. It's very specific. And if you don't know, don't act like you do. And I've been really lucky to kind of live in all those lives. And I understand, I get it. And it's really hard, because there's a lot of jujitsu guys that are like, "Hey, come train jujitsu," and they say the same things, but they were never cops. And that's not a knock on them. The cop should be big enough to go, "You know what? No, you're an expert in this, and I'm going to trust what you have to say, because you're a person and you're an expert in what you do."
Mhm.
But that's hard in law enforcement. It's really hard. That trust isn't there. You get people lying to you all day, and you're not gonna you're not gonna believe somebody. So it's a weird dynamic, but we try to break that. And in our classes, we kind of have a going rule, like, hey, we don't bitch and complain about our department. We don't, none of it. We don't do that.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I was just thinking. So you're getting a variety of people coming in, whether they're in law enforcement or just any Joe Schmo that's walking in and trying out jujitsu. How do you try to instill these values of hard work, service, friendship within your students? Or is that something that you've noticed has evolved over time?
It's just evolved. It's palatable. I mean, you've experienced it when you come into the gym. Like it's different. Like, right away, like
You
the
guys
se-
have a very strong culture and
yeah.
community, that's for sure. I mean, there is something different about the community that you have developed, and people can feel that. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it really is admirable to see where you've taken the community and where everybody else has continued to build each other up, because I do think it has been a group thing. And so it's really great to see where you guys have come and where you guys are going to continue to go. So,
Yeah, it's just little pieces, and I really try not to treat people like they're too stupid to know because they haven't done it, and I just try to explain everything as straightforward as possible and give people the utmost amount of respect, and you
the
know,
freedom to ask questions too.
yeah, fire away, like, and there's so many variations of so many things, and I don't know everything. I've been lucky to see a lot of stuff, and I've been lucky to fail at a ton of things. And that's really what I feel like I bring to the gym, is, hey, don't do this. Why? I paid for it with my knee. I paid for it with my calf. I paid for it with this, right? That helps, but also there's no judgment. Like, if you need to take a breather, take a breather. Like, there's no judgment. Like, we're all pushing ourselves and everybody's on a different scale. And sometimes that's a hard thing to manage because you get the whole group really going, and then all of a sudden someone who's not used to it kind of, man, and just, come on, man, let's go. And they're like, they don't realize how far they were pushed. So I have to manage that of like, hey, guys, easy. And they're much better now. But when we first started, I think they were really, really trying to help build that culture of,
Sure.
flat out. So yeah. But I mean,
Yeah.
it's just their love for it. And I get it. I get it. How to train with us affect the way you look at things, and how did it affect your life?
Yeah, I think the respect that was inevitable. I think from day one it was very clear to see the respect that your students had for you, and that you gave to your students. And so in that, honestly, if we really think about it, that's something that your parents try to instill. You respect your elders, or you respect whoever it is that's teaching as you're going through school. But even then, you still have the little shitheads that are kind of like in class. And I think it's just a lesson that you're always supposed to be doing and evolving as a kid. But then you get into adulthood and you realize no matter what work environment there is, you're still battling that, where people have different criterias of what they think respect is, or whether they believe that they truly need to give it or get it. I just think those boundaries are different. And so that was something that was very different about coming into your gym. Was it was very clear and easy to see that respect was there. And so that's cool. That shows that there's already these standards, and it was never preached. It was never like, you need to respect me or you need to respect one another. It just happened. And so I know I came in later and you guys had all known each other, and this was probably evolved over time, but it was cool for me to come in and see such a strong community of people from various backgrounds, different family lifestyles, come in and train, and to see before class, same level of respect, during class, same level, and then after. And to know we are all on different levels. There's nobody that's ever going to be the same. Yet on the good days, we're hyping up the people that are killing it. People that are struggling on the bad days, we're still hyping them up and getting them through whatever it is that they're struggling with. That's just was cool to see. I mean, and that's just a brief way for me to even encapsulate what I saw, but it was much more than that. And I think people that have been to your gym in those classes, Roland, I think they would all agree. There's just a feeling. I think you just know. And to me, that's the first word that comes to mind, is just there was a full standard of respect, and you don't get that in many environments anymore. It might be expected, but it doesn't mean it's always followed through with, or there's always still the little shithead here or there that's just still going to mess with that. And you didn't really see that at the gym. It was just like everybody kind of kept each other accountable and wanted to come in and work hard and be better and just be good people. while you're also you're like killing each other at the same time. And so it's just it's such a weird balance, but yeah, that's how I can summarize it as best I can.
Nice. I'm glad it. What were the things that you carried with you? Like, are there things that you carry with you in practice?
Yeah, I mean, fundamentals. You were one that from the beginning, you're going in there to learn new things. But I think just trusting in your abilities and remembering the fundamentals. And no matter how many years of experience that you have, you should always be trying to sharpen those initial skills, because that's going to make all the other fine details later fall into place easier. And so that was something that I really, really taken away. You just kind of instilled so naturally, because there were so many times where we'd get caught up in all the tiny details, and then you'd remind us, you'd take us way back to like, where's your pressure at? Or just something very simple from the very beginning. Let's get that foundation solid first before we worry about all the other details. And I think that can carry off the mat too, is just, where's your foundation at? Where are you solid? Then we can get all the other details smoothed out and in place.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, I know you brought up Christianity and your faith, and that you kind of started exploring that as your family did. Can you share your experience of the day that you felt the calling, and how did that moment change your direction just in life and within martial arts?
It was a big day. I've never really considered myself important enough for anything divine, for a feeling. I used to always have really bad dreams, like night terror type dreams. And when I was growing up, I never, I'm not gonna lie, I don't think I felt like the presence of God many times in my life. But now looking back, I see how I was guided. I'm glad that I kind of see where I was supposed to be, and where I wasn't supposed to be. And it was very interesting. I was working for a high net worth family, had a great job. I worked for the estate. I was on that security team. I was doing great, had a great work-life balance. I mean, I had enough time to teach full-time in jiu-jitsu, run my academy, and do stuff there. Everything was good. I had no wants for money. I had no wants for anything. Everything was going great. And I was doing dishes, looking out the window. And my wife was sitting there reading a book. And I felt just right away something behind me, and I heard, it's time. And it wasn't in words, it was a thought. Like, the thought was put in my head, and but I also could hear a voice. It was really weird. I don't know how to fully explain it. And I just looked up, and the hairs on the back of my neck went, and I was like, oh, whoa, this just happened. And I knew right away who it was. I knew it wasn't my dad. I knew it wasn't a ghost. I knew exactly who was talking to me. And that was the terrifying part, because I've never felt the presence of God like that. And I went like this, and Jonna goes, "Are you okay?" I think she was thinking I was having a stroke or something. And I looked at her and was like, "Have you ever had a calling?" And she closes her book and she sits back and she goes, "Yeah. You want to talk about it?" And I go, "Nope." And I went back to doing dishes. And she was like, "You want to talk about it?" Mm-mm. And I just kept doing dishes. And so, like, a day later, she goes, "Hey, you want to talk about that?" And I was like, yeah. And I go, "I think I had a calling." And she goes, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "Well, I know I had a calling. It seems weird." And I explained it to her, and she was like, "What do you think it means?" And I said, I, I don't know. I don't know what it's time for." And she goes, "You don't think that maybe it's all the people we've been helping? You don't think that it's this? You don't think that it's that?" And I went, yeah, but there's more. And I don't know what. I don't know what. And we'd been going to church for probably a year and a half. And I was like, yeah, I don't, I mean, it's definitely the gym. I have to focus more on the gym, and it's time for this. And I think it's a time for a lot of things. And I think that the law enforcement thing, we started that program, and there was an opportunity for me to step away from working for that family as a part of their company and their estate. And I took a severance that kind of shocked a lot of people. And I kind of had a plan B on the side that was a similar position, but less involvement. And it was a position that was being created for me on another team. And I was just kind of working a side thing for the money purpose. I didn't really want to work for the team, but it was great money, and I didn't have to be there all the time. And it would just funnel more money into the gym. So I left, And I trusted that that job was going to pop up, and it did. And then I interviewed for it. And then the next interview, I thought I knocked that one out of the park. But then they were like, hey, sorry, we went another way. And I went, oh, that's humbling. That's a shot to the stomach. And I don't have a backup plan for that. And John was like, don't you remember your calling? And I was like, yeah. She goes, did you want to work for them? I said, no, I just wanted their money. She's like, when were you ever chasing money? I was like, yeah, that's a good point. And then I started applying to a bunch of other things. And she goes, Roland, this isn't what you're supposed to be doing. And you know what's crazy? I've never not gotten a job that I applied for. Wild. 30 jobs, all turned me down. And John is like, hey, God opens doors. God closes doors too. And I'm like, you're right. And it was funny because I wasn't sad. I'm just supposed to do this. I never thought that, like, this is what I'm supposed to do. Like, I don't take myself that serious. I don't think I'm that important. I don't think I'm that good. I think there's tons of people that are better. But this is what I'm supposed to do. And I have to think as, according to my faith. And my faith is like, you're a tool for God. You're supposed to do God's will, and you have to be in service of him. And so what are you going to do? Live by the words that you're saying, man. You can't just, talk the talk. You got to walk the walk. So I was like, okay, this is what we're doing. And God wants me to do this right now. So this is what I'm doing. So we went all in and put more time in, added more classes. And, it really has helped a lot of people. It's really changed a lot of lives. And the satisfying thing to me is like being able to sit on the wall and watch 60 people train and beat the snot out of each other and laugh, get up and laugh, and see husbands, wives, kids all training together and, doing this healthy function that brings their families closer together. And all of the things that you learn in jiu-jitsu, just they mirror biblical principles. And so, I'm not a preacher. I'm not, I'm not qualified for any of that, but I know that this mechanism brought me closer to God. Maybe I'm supposed to have a venue that allows other people to possibly experience that too. So it was a wild thing to have a calling, but you can't ignore it.
Are you full-time, completely committed to the
Yeah.
gym then?
Yeah.
That's
Full time.
great.
Yeah. So that's all I do now. And I have a consulting firm where I consult to law enforcement, municipalities, and private security. I consult for their DT programs, other hard skills, firearms and driving and medical and things like that. But the manner in which they get their information is different. It's not just transactional content, right? So that way they can suffice a KPI. When I consult for a company, especially a company that, maybe is looking to make a personnel change, maybe looking to make an organizational change, I do all that security consulting. They usually appreciate the fact that one of the recommendations that's common is you have to hire on moral standard. You can't build consistency out of somebody that doesn't have a moral standard or a proven track record of moral standard, because they're not predictable. People that are wishy-washy and if they're just trying to make money, you have no idea if you're going to retain them. You have no idea if they're not going to steal your intellectual property. You have no idea of any of that. But if they're good people, they're going to show up when they say they're going to show up, and they're going to give you what they're going to give you, and they're going to do things in good nature. And so when you have leadership, you have to start with your leadership to be of high moral standard. And if they're not, they will never care and invest in their team. And that will echo through your entire organization, and it will always be unpredictable, and you'll always be surprised in low times. Companies that are built like, that's why family companies, like family owned companies, often during hard times, they have a predictable scaling. Nothing shocks anybody because these people are all family to them. Small business, nothing really shocks them. They know what's coming because the person running the company and the person sweeping the floors, they're not disconnected. They're connected. They get a lot of face time. So, everything has a face. It's not just numbers. Old style business works best. And I mean, even in the security industry, it's kind of common practice that, hey, you call one of your buddies you used to work with. Hey, I know this guy. He says he worked here, and he said that he used to be part of this unit. I know you were part of that unit. Is that legit? Yep. What kind of guy is he? Oh, okay. All right. Is this somebody I can lean on? Yep. Is this somebody that can be my speed dial if I need something done? And you'd be amazed sometimes the conversations. Nowadays, everything's, PC, and it's just different. So it's just different. People hiring for different reasons.
Sure.
And I get to help those organizations. So that's the other half of
What you're doing.
what I'm doing. So that's the unseen half, which I prefer to keep it, word of mouth, and so that way I don't get overwhelmed with work
Sure.
that way. So
Yeah,
that's all I do.
that's great. So where do you see the future of BJJ and grappling going, both globally and just within your community?
Ooh. Um, I don't really look that big. I really don't. I really just focus on what I can touch. And that kind of keeps me eyes on the prize and focused. If I can't touch it, I don't see it.
What's your vision for Journeyman Grappling then?
My vision for our gym is to get bigger and have more influence in our community, to do the same thing that we've been doing, to not lose authenticity and to keep our culture the same, but also get better. I mean, there's so many things we can improve on. And just have endurance in the process. I mean, it's really hard. I mean, it's just like people in their faith. You can, for some moments in your life, you're like, oh, I feel it. And then all of a sudden, boo, and it's like, have endurance. This is a long race. And I know that we've done really well in a short period of time. And I don't want to get, I don't want to get starry eyed. I really want to just keep working and keep plugging away. And I'll pick my head up at year 10 and then take a breath and then go back down. So that's the point. But getting back to your other question, I feel like grappling is going to be cyclical to where they're right now it's kind of at an all-time high, and they're having to be campy to get something more entertaining. And that's kind of a bummer. People are playing characters and it's all about money. It's all money centric. Oh, what are you going to do extra for $100,000? I miss the days of people that would do something like, I'll do it for free. Those kind of people are the people that built this country, right? Like, no, I'm going to do it because I'm supposed to. How about that? You know what I mean?
Sure.
So I feel that that's going to make a comeback in some years, that people are going to be attracted to that.
Yeah.
And I think that'll make a comeback in wrestling as well. And I feel like more wrestlers are going to cross-train jiu-jitsu, because the highest level wrestlers treat mentally wrestling like lifelong jiu-jitsu players. There's no such thing as a loss. It's just learning. And they compete so much. They know this is just a process. You know what I mean? And,
Mm-hmm.
and whether they win a world championship or they lose first round at a qualifier open, hey man, it's just another day. And this is a process. And
Yeah.
I feel like that's going to trickle down more to the high school level more than it is now, because there's so many more prep academies. There's so many more kids that are dialed in to where, in wrestling, you're seeing guys, high schoolers beat NCAA champs at open tournaments. What is happening? It's crazy.
Yeah.
And the reason is they're adopting that mindset early. And I think jiu-jitsu has a form of that mindset of like, no, this is for life. Like, I'm just going to train flat out, and losses or whatever, I'm just going to just always be there. And I feel like the crossover is going to be more in the future, because wrestling's super exciting.
Yeah.
Jiu-jitsu, especially gi jiu-jitsu, is not the most exciting thing to watch sometimes. And if you educate your viewers, they'll get more out of it. So I think
Yeah.
they'll probably be more focused on educating the viewers on what gi jiu-jitsu is.
Yeah. What's actually going on out there?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
totally.
Yeah.
Mhm.
If you could leave your students with one lesson to carry for life, on or off the mats, what would it be?
That's a rough one.
Mm-hmm.
It's a marathon, not a race. It's all short-lived, so don't get too proud of yourself, but don't get too down on yourself. I mean, have to take it in stride. And I think a lot of people get really focused on things that are too far away, or things that they get hung up on things that were in the past. And the more in the present you are, the more effective you are, the better you are, and also the happier you are.
Yeah. Love it.
Yeah, that's it. Enjoy the now.
Wonderful. All right, Roland. Well, I always end with these last two finisher questions. So,
Mhm.
what is something that you wish didn't have as much of a grip on you in your life?
Hmm. Comparison and regret. Like, I would regret a lot that I wasn't certain places when I should have been. And then you get older and you realize I wasn't supposed to be there, and then when the guilt follows. So don't, where you're supposed to be, where you're supposed to be. In comparison, there's a lot of times when um, I would see people's admiration for other competitors, and there was always that little piece that I could beat that guy. Don't be that person. don't compare yourself. It's not
Mm-hmm.
competition. Just, want to train with people because hopefully they do beat the snot out of you because you'll learn something. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you don't learn anything from wins. So it's kind of weird that you do jujitsu to learn how to lose and not learn how to win. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And what's something that you wish you had more of a grip on in your life?
Oh, discipline. I wish I was yeah, I wish I was a really disciplined, hard-nosed person. I'm a pretty soft guy that just I'd prefer to do
From the outside looking in, people would not know that that is a struggle for you.
no, yeah, they wouldn't. It's kind of crazy. But I mean, I think the Mike Tyson quote that I love the best is discipline is doing something you hate and making it look like you love it. And I don't hate jujitsu. I don't think anybody doesn't. I don't think anybody does not benefit from more discipline.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I do is I really try to focus. I do this with my whole family, and it probably drives them nuts. Everybody breaks. Everybody breaks. Everybody has that thing that will make them break. And what you do is our process is you identify that thing, your weakness, because then sometimes your weakness is your strength. You identify what that is, and you push your tolerance back further and further and further until the person on the outside doesn't even know it exists and they think you're unbreakable. And you go, no. I know exactly where I break. I'm just going to hold it as far away from you as possible. And that's where the more discipline you have, the further away you can push that point, but everybody breaks. Everybody
Sure.
breaks.
And just building that self-awareness too.
Yeah, it's hard to be honest with yourself. It's really,
Mm-hmm.
it's hard, but jujitsu is really good because it's just a big mirror that shows you
Puts you in a
all of,
lot of vulnerable spots and
yeah.
situations.
For sure.
Yeah.
And, and every white belt that rolls with a black belt and the black belt chews them up and they're like, God, it was so easy for you. And if you were inside of that black belt's head, that black belt is actually going, oh my God, it was so hard to do anything against this white belt. I'm losing all of it. And they look at it as a total loss and you think that they won. So you don't realize that everyone's measure is different.
Sure.
No one's measure is the same and you have no idea what's going on in somebody else's head. It's a really complex tool. It's an awesome art that really is a great way to express yourself, but also it can drive you crazy.
Yeah, for sure. Very good. Any shout outs that you need to make?
I'm just thanking all my training partners and my family and thank God and our website, Journeyman Grappling .com and our Instagram. We pretty much just kind of push everything through our Instagram, which is Journeyman Grappling. Maybe there's some things that you like, stop by, drop in. Um, and if you have an organization that needs some help in security operations and hard skills, we can help. And we are a cadre of very low signature help and an improvement. We don't share who we work with, and we like to keep it no viz that way.
Love it.
Yeah.
Very good. And I'll put all the information down in the show notes. So anybody listening is in the Washington, Ording, Seattle area, please go check out Journeyman Grappling. You will not regret it. And yeah, give them a follow on Instagram at Journeyman Grappling. Show some love. And Roland, just keep doing what you're doing. I appreciate this conversation. It was very much enjoyed. And thank you for trusting me in this journey. I know being asked on a podcast that hasn't even launched yet, I just appreciate you giving me the time and the space and to talk about something that we both love. And it was a joy. And so I know there's going to be others out there listening that are going to enjoy what you have to say. So thank you.
Thanks. And thank you. I mean, I know you're going to kill it. You're amazing. You and your husband are amazing at everything you guys do. It's been a pleasure to train together. So it won't be the last time we all train together.
Absolutely
And
not.
I know everyone's going to love everything you do. And it was a great experience. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening to The Grip. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. You can also follow along on Instagram at The Grip Pod to stay up to date on new episodes. That way you can send over a DM if you've got a question you'd like to hear answered on our roll call series. Now remember, stay sharp, be grounded, and never lose your grip. See you next time.